we go through experiences in life, and some people go through, really horrific stuff. But when I look at my own experience, I've always thought of choices like, do I let this define me going forward, or do I take ownership of it and look at how I move forward with it?
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to ALLSMITH. Today's a special conversation. I'm excited to unpack the story of a couple behind the Midlife Mentors, the award-winning wellness company. They've redefined what it means to thrive in midlife. And I'm really interested in that because it's a space that often gets overlooked. And there's not enough of the sexy highlighter that goes over the midlife. It's usually the early stages and the final stages. And I think the messy middle is where all the juicy magic kind of happens. And so I'm very excited to unpack the story of Claire and James Davis. Guys, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us on
Really thrilled
here.
to be here.
What's funny is I do those intros all the time, and I really work hard on them. But in your guys' case, there's this, when you think about the middle, I think about a sandwich, and I'm like, I don't really care that much about the bread. I like the meat and the tomatoes and the sauce and all the things in the middle. And it's kind of a paradox that people overlook that. Everybody falls in love with potential with the 18 to 22-year-old that might make it to the NBA or has this huge reservoir of potential. And then it's you go through the messiness of life and it's kind of mundane, and unless you master the mundane and get to the other side where you're really successful, or you wrote these books, or you did these things, it's not really celebrated. And in the CrossFit space, you have the famous workout Fran, 21, 15, 9. The 15 set is the hardest set, is it's right in the middle. It's 21 thrusters, 21 pull-ups, 15 thrusters, 15 pull-ups, 9 thrusters, 9 pull-ups. 9, you see light at the end of the tunnel. 21, you're full of piss and vinegar and just coming out of the gate hot. But the 15 set gets overlooked. And I just think it's really fascinating that you guys have concentrated on that middle portion. And I'm really excited to learn more about your lenses on that space.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. I mean,
I echo all of that. It is a messy middle. And I think that's why we love it so much, because we were running retreats for so many years, 12 years we've been running retreats. And we kept seeing midlifers come to us with not just kind of physical, I'm piling on the pounds, or I don't feel very good in my skin anymore. It was more that psychological and, misidentity. It's I've worn so many hats and I've prioritized so many other people and things. I've completely forgotten who I am. So it's really that stuff, that juicy stuff that we got really, really excited about because of our background. And then we added that extra element of looking at hormones. So it was the physiology, the psychology. And then there was this also added element of emotional and spiritual disconnection that they were feeling. So yeah, that's when we started our podcast into early 2019. Was we were going through it, but we kept seeing people come with the same stuff. We were like, we've got to help these people. And we love talking about it.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting that there is a cultural aspect to this as well, which you touched on there. We also talk about generation squeezed, and it's so true. Marketers kind of look at the generation above, the baby boomers, and they had, in the US and the UK, the greatest acceleration of property wealth. So they're marketed to because they're asset rich. Then, of course, marketers love the young people coming through. It's get the customer now, I've got them for life. So there's all this focus on, like you said, people in their teens, their 20s. But that spot in the middle, your 40s, your 50s, is kind of a blind spot for marketeers. And when you're in that age bracket, you feel it as well. You're kind of actually, no one's talking to us, but we're here. We've got stuff to offer. So it's interesting that you brought that up. So I think it's something that a lot of our clients and the work we do gets reflected back to us, this kind of generation squeezed in the middle. Yeah.
I like that you said that because there's recency bias. And what I mean by that is when you're young and you're doing the thing, there's visual representation, there's a tangible proof of concept. And to elaborate on that a little bit more, it's the reason why you get to 30 to 50 and it's the older I get, the better I was. You're romanticizing on, oh, back in the day, you know, in high school, I used to do this. In college, I used to do this. Competing in this sport, I used to do this. All those marathons I did in my life. You have all of these different things that in your brain, you're like, oh, if I do these things, I'm going to gain the validation from the world, the credibility. I've done. But that's kind of like working out. And it's kind of like really pushing the boundaries of performance, which is awesome when you're in it. But then on the other side of that, you go, oh shit, I haven't really worked in. I want all these other people to love me, but I don't actually love me. And then you
Correct.
combine that, which is the psychology component that you mentioned. You combine that with, why is it taking me so much longer to recover? Why do I have a little bit of brain fog? Oh, I need to do a blood panel. Oh, wow. My testosterone or my estrogen or my progesterone is slightly out of whack. What does that mean? How do I better understand? How do I make subtle adjustments with my lifestyle, with my environment, with my tribe, and maybe even some sort of hormone replacement therapy in the future when it's appropriate and appropriately dosed to enhance the quality of my life? But that's a vulnerable space to be. That's not immediately where people go. They're like, hey, I'm in pain. They go to a traditional Western medicine doctor. They get some sort of conversation around their blood pressure and statins, or they get a conversation around pain medication and some sort of NSAID or anti-inflammatory. Very rarely do they look at the human as a whole and go, hey, how's your sleep? First and foremost, probably the number one drug on the planet. What's your sleep hygiene look like? What are your relationships like? Before we even talk about movement, your relationship with nature, grounding, breath work, sauna and ice exposure, movement, things that you and I both know are very important, but those things aren't discussed. Back to what you said, James, and that's not marketeering. A lot of that stuff doesn't do that little money making thing. And so then as a byproduct, it gets overlooked. It gets pushed to the side or bullied rather, and viewed as, oh, there's no scientific evidence or data there. And it's like, well, why not? Because big pharma is not funding it
Yeah.
and it's not very profitable. And so when I look at what you guys are doing, it's like you're at the intersection, once again, the messy middle of preventative medicine on the left, which is lifestyle, movement, exercise, mindset. And then you have reactive medicine on the right, which is, hey, if there's a car accident, if there's cancer, if there's something that's like really above and beyond what lifestyle can improve, we have these protocols over here. And in my opinion, the answer is in that messy middle, just to give a little bit of an analogy. And I think this very much relates to your guys' philosophy and psychology. And I'm curious to paint like a 30,000 foot view for our listeners today, like how you guys view kind of the wellness system and healthcare and how that fits versus how it doesn't fit.
Yeah.
I think Western medicine is broken, right?
Totally.
We have to be grateful we live in a time where there are huge medical advances, but there's been too much focus, I think, on fixing the problem after it occurs, rather than looking at why it's occurring and how we stop it occurring. I think in ancient history there was some areas of the world where doctors were paid if everyone was well, and it was only when they got sick they got fined, because then they weren't doing their job keeping the population healthy, which is kind of the reverse here. And we know we only have to look at something like the new GLP-1, the semaglutides, the fat loss drugs. Perfect example of pharma pushing that. Suddenly everyone can lose their weight really easily by jabbing these things. And yes, there's a place for them if you're severely overweight, if you have type 2 diabetes. But they're now being taken as just like a lifestyle accessory because it's an easy fix for people. It's like, oh, I can just jab this pen, my appetite's gone, great. What you're not thinking about is, oh, well, how's that affecting the rest of my hormone pathways? What's happening to my muscle mass? 40% of the weight loss can be muscle mass. What's happening to my bone density when I'm missing out on all these nutrients? Why aren't I looking at what my belief systems were that made me eat so much in the first place? So I ended up in this place. So I think we're slowly getting there, but we have to do more to look at the individual on a holistic whole rather than the external factors. What the underlying values, beliefs, habits, behaviors that are driving these things. And I think we have to definitely shift more towards preventative medicine rather than fixing the problem when it's occurred. There's a place for it, of course. If you're walking down the road and you break your leg, you want to get the plaster cast on and fixed. But there are so many things we could be heading off. Like I know that in the UK and I think in the US we have an obesity crisis, and I'd argue the way to fix that is to look at what's the food environment like. Why are people getting bigger? Well, they're more sedentary. There's more processed foods. There's more sugar. What can we do to control that? But instead, governments seem to be leaning now towards, let's just make this jab available for everyone. Well, it's a fix, but it's not really fixing the root of the problem.
Yeah, I think the value system needs an assessment. The downside of that is that the value system takes time. And we've talked about it time and time again on these shows. And that is the average time domain with a doctor is 7 to 9 minutes.
Yeah.
And there is a profit system. It is how many people or how many patients can a doctor see a day. They're incentivized to do so based on having hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt and then trying to, in their brain, they'll justify it and market it as maximizing profit care. But with an insurance model, I mean, something as small as just getting a saline IV is outrageously expensive in a hospital versus you and I both know that it's like less than $20 to get an IV. I mean, yes, you can drink, you can hydrate, you can do all the things with electrolytes, but like an IV is going to go straight to the source and it's going to help a ton for many people. But it's tremendously marked up and overpriced, which then makes the barrier to entry really high, just as a small example. And I think you're spot on. Like, people want the easy fix. It's this ideology of fix rather than understand, process, and then integrate and then change behavior. It's a lot easier to hand somebody an ad than it is to eliminate bad habits and have the honest conversation and rewire the OS, the operating system. But what's so ironic about that is rewire the operating system on this little device like every 3 weeks, every 6 weeks. Like, we're willing to do it with tech because we can press a button and you get immediate gratification. And in my brain, I'm like, we can actually do that with the human experience too. Like, press the button, make the decision. I want my life to look like this. And then let's go backwards and create the most optimal and consistent path forward that leads to the most compliance. And I think that's what you guys do a great job of, at least from my zoomed out perspective. The compliance is the science. If you want people to enhance the quality of their life, you have to build trust with them. You have to show proof of concept. And then there has to be some sort of incentive model. Hey, when you do this, here's the return on investment. Just like the stock market, but it's the body market. But it's not as valuable because, going back to what you were alluding to, the eye test. What do I look like in the mirror? Oh, I'm losing weight? Amazing. But looking under the hood's not as sexy when you've got this vehicle over here where the paint looks nice and the tires are well done. All that's amazing. But then you see and like the engine's fucked up. Yeah. But nobody cares because it's not judged by the world.
And that's it. I was having the exact conversation this morning with a client. And I was saying everyone is so concerned now with what they look on. Like, it's social media, it's tech, it's so many things, but it's more focused on what we look like rather than that longevity, rather than how is my body going to cope with aging. It's that quick fix. I was also having a conversation the other day which I was absolutely horrified by. I'm alcohol free, so I'm chairing a panel in a couple of weeks, an alcohol free panel. And we were talking about some hints and tips that we could give the audience. And one lady said that I think she'd been to a conference, an alcohol free conference, and they were suggesting, actively promoting, in fact, that they take the weight loss drug to stop with the cravings of alcohol as well. So it's now not just being used as let's drop some weight. It's now got this other benefit that's being promoted, that if you want to go alcohol free, or you've got literally, if you've got an addiction to alcohol, use the weight loss drug, because it's going to drop your desire, that dopamine, that reward system, the need for sugar, all of that stuff. And I was just horrified. I said we're not going to say that on the panel. I can't have that, because I disagree so strongly with what you've just said. But, and also to the point about not looking at lifestyle factors, one of the things that we see a lot with midlife men and women, but particularly women with HRT, is it's not a magic pill. It's not a magic bullet. You can't just take it and then down 2 bottles of wine a night and eat like crap, not move your body, not do any of the psychology, not do any of the managing stress, and think that you're going to be hunky-dory again. So people go and take HRT and it's like, oh, okay, I'm going to be sorted now, because it's that quick fix thing. But also, like, to your point, it just feels, for some people, it just feels like it's going to take too much time to sort the rest out. And at their doctor, in their 9-minute doctor appointment, if they're lucky, no one's asking these questions about their lifestyle factors, what their sleep's like. Yeah. So I just wanted, and antidepressants, instead of sorting out the core of that, they go, here's some HRT and some antidepressants.
I think it's really interesting. Like, the thing holding most of us back is the story that we tell ourselves. And I think when the narrative is, hey, you've got this disorder or you've got this addiction, it creates a psychological facade that I can fix this, as opposed to, this is learned behavior. You're in pursuit of an altered state of consciousness in the form of alcohol, drugs, maybe certain environments. And then in the form of GLP-1s, it's like you're hiding from the truth. You are taking this because your perception is that movement and exercise don't work, but they don't work because of your habits, because of your sleep, because of your food, because of the things that you're unwilling to give up. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't indulge in pleasure. We shouldn't, have a few nights a year where we stay up past midnight and indulge in those special experiences. Side note, I've said this a few times. I want to give you guys a little laugh. One of my friends was like, dude, nothing good happens after midnight. I'm like, I know, right? And he goes, except for the best shit ever. And so I laughed and I was like, yeah, that's actually kind of true in some cases. But like anything, when that muscle is flexed too frequently, you're going to have a negative return. And it's going to end up being toxicity to your body based on sleep deprivation, probably alcohol, and then obviously changing your circadian rhythm and not being in alignment with the sun and the rise and fall of how nature kind of works. I love that we're kind of in alignment here. How did you guys kind of clean out the fog or the smoke in the mirrors to gain better clarity in this, to then decide, you know what, this is a rabbit hole that I want to go down, and then take the knowledge and experience to funnel that to a community and jump into business in that realm?
It's a great question. I mean, our experiences are very different, but I think so for me, I had disordered eating, I would say, for a really, really long time, throughout my teens and actually into my 20s. And then I was put on antidepressants because I went through a messy divorce, and I just took the advice of my GP as read. I was in such a state. I was like, yeah, I'll take the antidepressants. And then I ballooned. So this constant kind of like battle with my body and how I saw myself was very real. But interestingly, I was a stress management consultant. I was a coach. I was a business coach for Microsoft. But this thing with my body was always my nemesis. It was very, very difficult for me to love what I was seeing in the mirror. So I had kind of these mindset strategies, and I was going out teaching it, and I was very spiritual, but my body just wasn't in alignment at all. So this is this missing piece. So when I was put on antidepressants and they made me balloon, I thought, I can't keep going on like this. My life is a mess. I was drinking loads of alcohol. So I decided there was something that just switched inside of me that was like, okay, I'm going to look into this nutrition thing. I'm going to look into exercise. And I don't know what triggered that, but I got a personal trainer and I started becoming quite obsessive about good nutrition. Rather than being skinny, I wanted to be strong. And that came out of my divorce experience, actually. I wanted to get my power back. I felt like my power had been taken away and I wanted to get my power back. And I felt quite weak physically. So that's where that came from. And once that piece of the puzzle got slotted in, I was away. I was like, it was the missing piece that allowed me to be stronger in my mind and spirit. And once I started to see this strong body appear, I was like, this is amazing. I've got to teach other people how to get this, because this story, it was so true. This story had been running for so long. And that's a journey. And that's a journey that's going to go on for the rest of my life for sure, of looking at and becoming self-aware and looking when things pop up. But it was that physical side, getting that aligned. Then I became a PT, nutrition, hormone specialist. And it was that integrated approach that you've alluded to. You can't take one thing in isolation. You can't sit in meditation, which is what I did, for silent retreats and years of just doing meditation, or years of just doing the mindset, or years of just going to the gym. You've got to do it all together in order to create this kind of peak experience and this self-knowledge. So that's where it began for me. More recently, a couple of years ago, I actually then went through burnout. So that then again shifted everything for me. Like, my life has completely transformed in these 2 years. I won't go into that story right now, but it's a process. And I think that's something that has deepened my compassion and empathy at midlife, because I'm going through perimenopause. Those hormonal changes are happening to me. I think that was part of what happened 2.5 years ago. But instead of it flooring me, I took it and I've helped create the version of myself that I am now, which I'm just phenomenally grateful for.
I love that so much. I really appreciate you sharing. We will circle back to kind of understand perimenopause and burnout, because I think that's relatable to a lot of different people's stories, and having some tools in their toolbox as to how to play with that is very important. James, what was your introduction to health and wellness? And like I said previously, clearing out the smoke and mirrors with regards to the healthcare system and wellness.
The Trident family taught me something really important this last year, that we are all a bundle of stories, both good, bad, and everything in between. All of their cold brews remind their customers that they are part of something bigger than themselves. I start my day with the Sweet Cream Cold Brew as I am prepping my mind and body for fitness, service, coaching, and podcasting. With various locations in San Diego, they offer over 14 nitro cold brews and a variety of specialty drinks. You can find the perfect brew and pair it with one of their treats from the Keto Bakery. You can check them out over at tridentcoffee.com and use code ALLSMITH to take your coffee experience to the next level.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I think that's a multi-layered answer.
Yeah, I don't know whether I answered it properly.
No, you did. You did. Well, they say everyone that goes into self-development, into therapy, into coaching, whatever, is that they're essentially looking to fix a problem with themselves, right? And I guess my journey started when I was a little kid. I was a big kid. I was sturdy. And then I got sent off to a school at a very young age, like a boarding school, and it was very sports-led. So I had this kind of thing of avoiding sport, being the chunky kid, and suddenly I had to do sport. And the weight came off, and I started to actually really appreciate, the physicality and what I could achieve. And I think that's where the journey started. I started becoming interested in why do people behave in the way they do? Why do they make the choices they do, myself included? Which led me into psychology and studying psychology for many years. And then I guess more recently, I've just always remained fascinated by the human condition. But I think I've seen so many men that I know struggle when they hit midlife. For a variety of reasons. I think listen, when we're younger, right, when we're in our kids or in our 20s, you like look ahead and you're like, oh yeah, by the time you're in your 50s, everything's gonna be amazing, right? I'll have the house, the car, the job, the relationship, life will be easy street. And we've got there, and it's not like that at all for most of us, right? We're still juggling our relationships. I had a marriage of many years break down when I was like in my early 40s. That was devastating to me. My self-confidence dropped. I had to do a lot of work to pull myself back up. And I kept seeing men going through a similar thing, but having nowhere to turn to, no outlet. They were just bottling it all up. And we all know that there's a pretty bad male mental health crisis. There's unfortunately a very bad male suicide crisis. And I do believe that's driven by a combination of societal cultural pressures, but also internal psychological pressures we put on ourselves as men as well. So long answer, but the work I do now and writing the book was really to give men a framework to understand what's going on for them at midlife in terms of their hormones, their physicality, why emotionally and psychologically they might be feeling why they are, and what they can do about it. Channels you can safely start to open up in and have these discussions and get it out in the open.
Yeah, it's well said. I appreciate you sharing that as well. What you mentioned about the men's mental health challenges and the suicide crisis amongst men is very interesting. I've had a few conversations with people about it, and there's a phrase that I think is interesting to unpack with you guys, which is figure it out, just be a man.
Mm.
And it's an interesting thought, right? Like, one part of the male psyche is like, yeah, I can do that. Like, that makes me feel needed. That makes me feel purposeful. That allows me to provide, protect, do certain things for the partner, for the tribe, for the business, for the group entity. And so, when you're well rested and when you're clear brained and when you have the resources to do so, that's like fun. It's like a cool approach that almost like gamifies the men's male experience. And that works until it doesn't work anymore. When you're like, hey, like I'm slowing down, my hormones are shifting, I'm going through something personally. So like the uncertainty in my personal life, in between my heart, in between my ears, in my brain, is making it so now when I get into the world, I feel judged, I feel weaponized against, I feel misunderstood.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I talk about it, it's, oh, you're being a little bitch. You can't manage your emotions. Don't go to therapy because only weak people go to therapy. And there's subtly this false perception of reality. That's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is I actually think there's also a lot of men that are simply feeling sorry for themselves, that make bad choices and then inevitably want to point the finger and blame this mental health issue or all these other things. Like, it's like, no, the mental health issue is your excuse for your bad behavior and your bad choices.
Oh,
And if you're listening to
that.
this, if you're listening to this, I'm calling you out. I've been there before. So I'm also calling out a former version of myself. And so I'm by all means like human, just like the rest of us. I'm not sitting here on a high horse by any means. But it takes that honest conversation, either with somebody that's willing to have it with you or with yourself. When you look yourself in the eyes when you're brushing your teeth, it's pretty tough to lie to ourselves. But we make promises. Oh, yeah, I'll be on time for that thing. I'll go to this place. I'll talk to those people. I'll close the deal. And then when you say, hey, I'm going to go exercise 3 times a week, you lie to yourself. You skip it one time. You're like, oh, it's okay. I had this thing. That leads to a depreciation of confidence.
Mm-hmm.
You end up judging the world because you're actually judging yourself.
Yes.
It's tough to love another if you can't love you. And I'm curious how you guys navigate this, because a part of me has a lot of empathy and compassion, especially for people that have been through tough things like divorces and traumas and PTSD and coming back from overseas, and our military personnel that has so much pressure, especially in Navy special warfare, which is what I connect with a little bit with some of the gentlemen out here in San Diego. But the other side has to be acknowledged too, which is you're going through these physiological and psychological effects based on poor behavior. And we need to correct the behavior, and then that's going to lead to an improvement in lifestyle.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I hear you on that. I think it's really interesting, isn't it? I think here's the basic thing. We go through experiences in life, and some people go through, really horrific stuff. But, when I look at my own experience, I've always thought of choices like, do I let this define me going forward, or do I take ownership of it and look at how I move forward with it? And I think that's where a lot of men get stuck, right? And I think there's 3 ways they do it. The first one is just be like, the lie to yourself. That hasn't affected me at all. I'm just going to carry on, when actually there's a deep wound within.
Just stuffing it down.
That's the whole, big boys don't cry. I'm not going to show weakness. And that can work for a short space of time, but sooner or later, the pressure's going to keep piling on, the cracks are going to come. The other extreme of that is, like you're alluding to, is like, oh, woe is me, this thing happened, how terrible. That means that now my life has this trajectory, there's nothing I can do. If only that thing hadn't happened. When you do that, you're giving the power to the thing to define you and your life experience. Probably the middle road is to go, oh, wow, that thing's happened. And this is for me as well. I'm like, that thing happened. That's not what I wanted at all. I feel bad. I see what role I played in that. But how am I now going to move forward? What's the opportunity behind it? What's the opportunity behind the obstacle? What can
Real quickly, what I love about that description that you just gave, it's taking ownership and accountability, but it's not practicing the art of deflection. It's like the trauma or the experience is like a car driving past. You like wave to it and you acknowledge it. You're like, hey, I acknowledge your existence. I acknowledge my role in why you're here, but I don't need to get in the car with you and allow this to dictate the direction or the trajectory of my life. I don't need to grant you permission to live inside of my physiology. I'm going to see this as an experience, and then I'm going to allow it to sharpen my sword so I can potentially move forward with that sword, carving a better path towards peak expression. That's using the experience to upgrade your operating system rather than using it as a sled that's too heavy to pull.
Yeah. And I think really important to say, right? This is the thing. We can't always do that on our own. So again, when we're like, okay, I mucked up here. It's gone wrong. I feel bad. Actually, I'm not quite sure how to do this. It's okay to put your hand up and go, you know what? I'm struggling with this thing. Could you give me a hand? And be like, that's not weakness. That's actually an amazing form of strength to actually put your hand up and ask for help. And I think that's where the real change can happen. And that's what, as men, we need to get better at doing that.
Yeah, I think that's really important to seek guidance, to seek help. And even if it needs to be slow, that's why I really admire what you guys are doing. I'm a big fan of betterhelp.com. That's where I started back in the day.
Yeah.
And it worked until it didn't work anymore. And I was craving a little bit more. But it got my foot in the door. It allowed me to leverage the crack in the door to then unlock Pandora's box and better understand why I am the way I am. And I think that led to just this curiosity that I wish most men had, rather than this expectation of I'm supposed to be this way. Why am I going through this? Why has this happened to me? Nobody understands. I feel isolated. I'm going to drink or exercise it away. And that's another thing I see in midlife is you see kind of a fork in the road. You see some people dive into these 100-mile races where they're kind of battling their demons. And, it's perceived as like, yeah, you're doing badass shit. Like your mind is so strong. And then like you look at other elements of their life and they're just like falling apart. It's just that one thing that seemingly gets the validation and notoriety, especially in social media culture. And then you see the other guys that are like, fuck exercise and wellness. Like I'm going to double down and just make more money and mask my psychology in my personal life with drugs and alcohol. and just single income, no kids. I'm just going to womanize and I'm going to do this over here. And that's, a blanket statement. It's a little judgmental, and it's not everybody, obviously. But I do see that, like, as far as just my white belt observational lenses, is like, those are two things that I feel like are kind of common in midlife. And I think there's a better way to operate. And I'm curious how you guys have those conversations when people are taking part.
It's really true, because I'm alcohol free. And that was just through choice, through perimenopausal symptoms, just realizing that alcohol does not coexist with hormone shifts for me. I just ended up being really anxious all the time. And I came off those antidepressants years and years ago. I was only on them for 6 months. But for me to actually think I feel so low now, so depressed and then so anxious, oscillating between the two, to think maybe antidepressants is a good idea. That's when I thought, okay, you probably need to give up anything that's contributing to that. So alcohol had to go. But anyway, one of the things that I really saw with alcohol-free groups that I was in, it was like whack-a-mole. I don't know whether you know what that is, but it's like you hit one thing down. So you've hit the alcohol down. Brilliant. You've hit a year milestone. You're alcohol-free. But another one pops up, another addiction that takes its place, because underneath this compulsive behavior is something that needs to be looked at and healed.
I've got to say as well, I think particularly with the alcohol and drug addiction, it is always these extreme sports that take over. They're suddenly like you say, 100-mile races,
Ironman.
every 2 weeks, Ironmans, or just the most grueling workouts you could ever imagine, but day after day after day. And it's, I guess, you could argue that's a healthier habit to have, but again, you've not really addressed what the root of that behavior is.
And I think, to your point, when you asked, like, how do we have these conversations with clients, I do think lived experience, the fact that we're in it and we've done it, like, lived experience speaks volumes. But I think, we don't go straight in there with clients necessarily. It's about reading the room. We don't necessarily go straight in there and say, you've got a trauma or there's something that needs to be healed. Actually, a lot of the time we go through the nutrition route or the exercise route and just create a level of understanding, empower them with knowledge, and then start bringing in a few habits, mindset habits, spiritual practices. And then from that, like to your point earlier, they do start to notice, with this integrated approach of moving their body, of eating well most of the time, still having like time where you eat. We're not really strict about all of this, but making sure that your nutrition is dialed in a bit more, making sure you're moving, and then just adding some of these other habits into their life. It starts to open up the neural pathways actually of their brain and start thinking what is possible. So it's a really different, it's a varied pronged approach, I would say.
Yeah, I think the other thing you can do is remove the judgment from it, and it's like horses for courses. But I always ask, well, do you want to make a change? Are you happy with the way you're living right now? And if the person's like, well, yeah, you know what, I am. The next question will be like, okay, well, let's play it forward. 1 year's time, 2 years' time, what's going to be the outcome if you carry on like this? And is that the outcome you want? And if it is still the outcome they want, then, happy to. But often they'll be like, well, no, actually, you're right. This needs to change. That needs to change. They're like, right. Because the thing is, we can get very trapped in life living us rather than us living life. We're just in it and we're carrying along. We're like, this is just the way it is. But actually, if we pause and we go, what do I want it to be like? What's the direction that I want to take? Who am I? Who is the man that's going to show up today? Then we can make more mindful and informed choices and start to really make those changes that Claire was talking about.
Yeah, and I'll just say one other thing as well. I don't know about you, but we don't attract the victim mentality people. Like, we just don't. Because of the way we are and the way that we come across and everything that we do, it's like, okay, we're very compassionate. We have empathy. We share that. We share our stories quite vulnerably and openly. But at the end of the day, we're very much about if there's shit going on, you have the power to change it. You take responsibility for the next stages of it. We're living proof of it ourselves. So we don't seem to, it's not like you're dragging people into that place of transformation or that desire to change. They wouldn't be coming to us if they weren't open to that concept, really.
Yeah. I like what you said, James, around, are you living life or is life living you? That's a really interesting one. And also just with the shift in addiction from alcohol and drugs to then ultra extreme exercise, it's, do you have fitness or does fitness have you? Do you have alcohol or does alcohol have you?
Exactly.
Right? All these things can be very unique tools. But going back to what you said, Claire, around we don't attract people with the victim mentality. I want to push on that a little bit in the sense that I think it exists in everybody in some capacity.
Mm-hmm.
The dosage might be lower because you guys have done this beautiful thing where you've used your lived experience to be other people's survival guide, which I think is honorable, courageous, and beautiful. But at the same time, some people might not relate to that. And I think you guys have the tools in your toolbox to basically take somebody's lenses that might be looking to the left and just kind of steer them a little bit more center. And I think what I'm hearing so far today with you guys is you read the room, you do an intuitive approach. You don't just have like a one size fits all model. You have curiosity and ask the right questions to take the intake. And that intake is not just like Western medicine where it's like answers to questions or on a scale of 1 to 5, how do you feel? Or give me some happy faces or sad faces that then lead to judgment by the doctor to get like fast intake and then think, okay, how do I fix? I think what you guys are doing is, how do I understand? Which makes people feel seen, which then builds trust. And then they're willing to make the subtle lifestyle adjustments, which I love things like journal prompts. I love that you mentioned spiritual practices or meditations. Very rarely in this day and age are those things looked at as valuable. It's like, oh, I've done that. It didn't work. It's like, well, did you really do it though? Did you actually set a clock and like truly try to answer those questions honestly and authentically? And when you say meditate, did you go for a walk while you were listening to your song or talking to somebody and just categorize it as meditation? Or did you actually get quiet? Because I know I work hard at meditation and I always have to correct myself because I say I'm not good at it because all the thoughts come in and all the things come in. But the fact that I continually use it as a practice to work in, not just work out, and we're consistently correcting the language around it, which is, hey, it's actively participating and noticing and being the role of the observer. And prayer is talking to God. Meditation is listening to God. And sometimes he's got a lot to say. And sometimes we can't clear the space of our own thoughts to allow the spiritual energy to come in.
Yeah.
But the shit works, man.
It does.
But
It does.
unless you actually practice it, though, it gets written off because it's not as measurable as take this dosage of a pill. So I'm curious, like when you guys are creating a framework and a structure for your patients and your clients, how you create buy-in around things like meditation and spiritual connection and journaling and things that we know work, but to the perception, it's woo-woo and BS.
Well, I think we try and empower people with the knowledge, basically, the why, like the why. What's the result? Because everyone wants to know what the result is. So, we do talk a fair amount about the science of reprogramming the mind, basically. We talk a lot about goals. We do talk a lot about how powerful your mind is. And those stories that you tell and your belief systems, where we really explain. So before we give them the tools, we kind of really explain what's going on, the neuroscience behind it. And that, for us, that's always so important because we want to know that stuff. And I think a lot of us we don't want to just blindly go, oh, I'm going to go and journal. I'm going to do some gratitude. I'm going to go for a mindful walk. I need, and I think most people do need to know what the result's going to be. So we give that first and then go, okay, so these are some practices that are going to help with that. And we say,
what does that look like? Like if you were to get specific on that, on like how you would communicate a journaling practice or a mindfulness walk, what does that language look like to the client?
Go on, you say.
Yeah, so normally we start by saying, look, there is a lot of, it might sound woo-woo, you know, you would have heard this stuff from New Age originally, but there's actually a lot of research from schools of positive psychology on the positive impact of journaling. And, you know, we'll talk to them about some studies out there. Optimistic people have better life outcomes. So we kind of back it up with the evidence first and frame it to give them context. Then we'll say, even if you're not feeling that, all we'd ask you to do is, we're not asking you to spend an hour a day, every day. You know, this journaling could be 5 to 10 minutes in the morning. Try it for 2 weeks. And then let's talk about how different you're feeling. Because, you know, lived experience is the greatest test of all. But I think if you can, if you have the context of framing it first with like, you know, there's studies and research showing this stuff works. They're kind of like, okay, and then get them to try it. And then get them to feed back to you.
And one of the things we see is like, oh, it's not working. Like you say, it's not working. It's not working. I'm like, well, how much do you want to change your life? Because this is the stuff that we do. So like, it's almost like a bit of tough love. It's like, well, you've been doing it a week and you're saying it's not working. So how much do you want to really change your mindset? How much joy do you want to bring into your life? How much peace, how much contentment and gratitude? We'll do it. Because it's taken us years and years to embed this practice and we're still learning. So I think sometimes it's a bit of that tough love as well.
Yeah. And it's saying stuff like to them like, yeah, how many self-help books do you have? And they're like, oh yeah, you know what, I've got loads. Like, well, how many of them have you actually read? Oh, well, only a few of them. And I'm like, how many of them did you not actually just read, but you did the practices in them? And they'll be like, yeah, none of them. And I'm like, well, listen, that's the equivalent of me buying like a manual for a car and then going, oh yeah, I can definitely change the engine on that car, no problem, because I've got a manual here, but I've literally never opened a manual, never done it. So again,
that's so common. The self-help books that people purchase, I think I've read a lot of them. Most recently, Let Them by Mel Robbins, which is everywhere right now.
Yes, everywhere.
But like, people just want the gist. They want the summary. They want the ChatGPT version so they can just, in their opinion, get the big rocks. But then they're missing like the marbles and the sands and the cup of coffee or the liquid that gets poured into the cup at the very end, which is that integration. And to echo this, I think this is a very important statement for you guys and our audience to know. We don't have an information problem right now. There's self-help books everywhere. There's AI. There's experts, practitioners, podcast on podcast with reservoirs of information. How many of you are basically like an information obese person where you constantly are eating information, but your action is zero? That's a very powerful question. Knowing is not enough. We must do. I forgot who said that, but like it's really important. And then there's the other side, which is junk miles. You're doing. That's the equivalent of, you know, the exercise weekend warrior that's running from the real truth. And they're doing, and they literally don't know how to be. And it needs to be this optimal push and pull dosage that allows us to understand exactly what you said. Put this into practice. Make yourself the experiment. Practice the art of trial and error. Don't just assume that it doesn't work because it seems like common talk and you sort of did. It's like asking somebody to mobilize and they like sort of rolled on a foam roller-ish while messing around on their phone. But then they go to a myofascial release specialist and they're like, oh my gosh, that hurts so bad, but it worked so good. Like my scap is moving great again. My hip doesn't hurt anymore. It's like, well, if you actually put honest truth and honest action within your mobilizing techniques and recovery and all those things, you might not get as like crickety knees or hips, but we don't want to do that. We want to check the box. Oh yeah, we watched this YouTube video and we did it like 60% ish, sort of sometimes. And that just is deflection in my opinion. It's like wanting to check the box, but then wanting the easier solution.
I think also one of the things that I find particularly, actually, I found this in myself as well, which has been a journey over the last couple of years, was we now have access, to your point, of information overload. Like when we're running, we're listening to a podcast. When we're walking, when we're doing everything at a million miles an hour, we're doing multiple things at multiple times. And so we have forgotten the art of being bored. We've forgotten the art of being still and being. In fact, I go even further to say we are frightened of that. We are constantly running away from that because we've had this crutch of distraction constantly, that we are frightened and scared of what might come up if we create that space. I think that's an epidemic I see in society, is constant distraction, and therefore you do not know thyself at all. You're constantly receiving noise, and you've totally lost your self-regulation, your understanding of who you are, your uniqueness.
Totally. It's almost a perception of FOMO, like fear of missing out. And I think the better question is, who am I if I'm not busy? If I'm not being productive, if I'm not moving the needle forward, I'm either stagnant or I'm going backwards. And some people categorize that as hell's waiting room, because you're not improving, you're not part of growth. If you're not growing, you're dying. There's so much hustle culture out there that people forget that, like, a field of rest brings a bountiful crop. But that rest and that indulgence in sunlight and breath and down regulation, being parasympathetic, not always being sympathetic in fight or flight, is important. There's a reason why there's yin yang, there's lightness with darkness, there's days and nights, there's laughter and joy, and then there's sadness and grief. There has to be contrast. But I think what's happening with AI, with the development of technology, it's, oh, I can get by with these biohacking tools and I can sleep 5 to 6 hours a night and I can get back at it. And then it's go, go, go. And then you're like, well, why should I change this? It's making me more money. I'm meeting more people. I'm doing the thing. I don't need that. And we create these stories once again. And then to take it even further, going back to the evidence-based arguments, like, oh, we're living longer than we've ever had before. You know, if there's an issue, we can just go to the doctor. There's not really conversations all the time, until more recently, around microplastics and metal toxicity and the lowering of the birth rate based on birth control and based on male fertility. Like, the list goes on and on. And that's why I really want to, like, dive into this, like take a shovel into this conversation with you guys, because I genuinely and authentically want to make changes in that space. And I think a lot of the world just goes, that's just the way it is. Hustle culture is the way it is. We're not going to stop tech. We're not going to be able to push back against, Facebook, Instagram, Silicon Valley, or Palantir. But at the end of the day, we're human.
Yeah.
And there's something about being human that just can't be replaced in its most authentic way when you're connected with your biology, physiology, and psychology.
Yeah. I think we're just very, very, very spiritually sick as well. I do.
Mm-hmm.
I think we are very spiritually sick. You look at our ancestors, they had this really beautiful relationship with nature, with the seasons, with the rhythms of everything. God, whatever you want to call, whatever that is for you, but something beyond ourselves. And I think with all of this tech, it really has created this disconnection with that soul part of ourselves that wants meaning, that longs for meaning, that wants to make a difference. Because, in society, I see so much division and so much anger and so much black and white thinking. But I also, I feel that inherently we are good. And I could just have this naive view of human beings, but I think inherently We are good with morals and what is right and wrong. And then when we're out of sync with that, this is what's creating so much pain.
And I think there's a challenge for us as well, right? Because to your point there, it is so easy to go, well, look at the state of the world, and who am I to like have any influence on that? So that's just the way it is. And yeah, there may be stuff that we haven't got control over, but I like to frame it like this. It's like, okay, what can I change? What is in with my power to change? What do I have control of? How do I want to show up so that I'm giving my best life experience? And hopefully that might inspire someone else to do the same thing. And guess what? If one person does that and another person joins, before you know it, you could have an army of millions of people all going, well, no, let's live this way and change it.
The worst thing is silence. Like that's how we've got in this mess, actually, is not speaking up.
Yeah. I mean, I think if we were to look back, COVID created a fear, uncertainty, and doubt that then led to isolation.
Yes.
We thought we were connecting based on social media and Zoom calls, but in reality, there's an energy when you're amongst the tribe, and there's a presence. There's a reason why there's hunters and gatherers, and then there's tribal culture around like a fire pit when we look back to tribal nature and like ancestral living. But what I'm seeing is people are craving love, they're hurt, and then they're struggling to figure out who to trust. And then based on this divisiveness that you mentioned, it's one school is trusting traditional medicine and saying, trust the science, look at all the research. But the irony is a lot of the people that are in that world are typically funded by either pharmaceuticals, grants. A lot of their survival and their well-being is based on a relationship with that environment. And like, I actually wasn't aware of that until like zooming out and analyzing this. Like, I don't think everybody like really believes in that lifestyle. But when you look at like the federal funding and the big pharma, like when you're getting a company car, they're paying for your gas, they're giving you a stipend for food. You have security in this capitalist world. Why change that? You may not believe what you're doing, but you're contributing to this mess over here because of the security that it provides you. And the ideology becomes, I'm just one person. Like, I'm just trying to provide for my family. It comes from, like you said, a good place. And they went to school for these things thinking that they were like going to be finding solutions to problems. And maybe they get in sales and maybe they're visiting hospitals and they're thinking, wow, like I'm in healthcare. Like how prideful and how awesome is that? I don't think it comes with negative intention. And it takes like big, hairy, audacious goals to be like, hey, I have all this security over here. I make great money. I have health insurance. My family does well. My kids are supported. To go, you know what? I don't align with this anymore. I'm going to take the leap over here out of corporate America and like really try to make a difference and fight the healthcare system and big pharma. And that's just like the reality of the matter. There's not as much funding over here. It's not as reputable. There's not as much research associated with it. I see what RFK Jr. is doing, and I think he's asking some great questions and getting food dyes out of the products in Walmart, talking about, vaccines and being like, hey, we're not anti-vax. It's more so like, let's take a look at this autism spectrum and let's see, like, can we spread out some of these dosages or remove certain vaccines so that way we're not putting all this toxicity into young children. The same way Western medicine says, hey, slowly introduce different foods. I don't understand the logic there. If they're like, you need these 30 vaccines before they're 1 year old, but then they're like, oh, be careful giving them a blueberry because they might choke. Yeah. It doesn't line up for me. And I'm curious for you guys, in observing this big mess, I definitely think it's a hard thing to digest. It's a hard thing to take a stab at. But if we don't try, we're inevitably going to keep going in the wrong direction. We're going to get lost in the sauce. And the quality of living is going to continually be this side picking. People are picking teams rather than like, let's logically look at policy over politics. And the reason why I verbalize it that way is because I think people are craving a tribe on the other side of loneliness.
Yeah.
I'm lonely over here during this pandemic. Now I need to feel seen, heard, understood, and loved. And when I'm on this tribe, they see the world the way I do, and I want to align with that. But the beauty of the world isn't just always being in alignment. It's seeking truth or seeking progressive information that's going to help enhance the quality of people's lives. And to me, that's not Ozempic and GLP-1s and more drugs. It's getting more connected with nature.
Yeah, and with each other.
With each
like,
other.
I think that's such an important point, is this lack of community, this lack of connection. And I think, you know, what's happening is when you're just on social media and you're in your own echo chamber, you just sit there on your phone or laptop or device, and obviously the algorithms are just feeding you the same stuff over and over again, and you're seeing stuff that either makes you fly into a rage, and then it's going to feed you more of that because it's getting reactions, or it's going to feed you more of the people that you relate to. So you're just in an echo chamber. And I think we've lost that ability to mix with other viewpoints, to respect each other's different viewpoints, to learn from different viewpoints. I mean, if I see stuff on social media that I don't agree with, I don't sit there as a keyboard warrior and start like shouting and raging. I actually just scroll through, or if someone's got a viewpoint, I'm like, okay, do I see that viewpoint? If I think it's completely wrong, I'm not going to spend ages and send my cortisol shooting through the roof. But yeah, I think loneliness, I think connection, community is a really big thing. And I'm not sure how to tackle that. But to your point, I don't think we should just be sitting there going, oh, I just can't do anything about it. In our own way, I mean, for me, this is a personal thing. Integrity is my top value. I cannot be out of integrity. If anything feels off to me, if, you know, like, for example, we get asked to promote certain things on social media or whatever, brands, I'm like, no, I can't, because I don't believe in that. So for me to sit, this is why I've always been kind of the black sheep, or been a bit different, and always pretty much worked for myself, because I can't, if I don't align with something in my soul tells me it doesn't align, and then I'm out of integrity. So it's actually, for me, it's not a choice. I can't be on that side. I have to speak truth and life into things and give different viewpoints in a respectful way, with compassion.
I like that. When you guys look at society, I feel like it's kind of been conditioned for us to view as midlife as a decline rather than an opportunity. And I'd love to hear how you guys have reframed that a little bit, because we've heard the phrasing, oh, you're over the hill. I'm on the back nine. And I don't think it has to be that way. And I'm curious how you guys kind of depict and categorize and define this midlife.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think it's the reason we got into doing what we're doing in midlife, because we saw so many friends like, oh, well, it's beginning and the end now, right? This is it. It's inevitable that it's downhill. Yes, look, there's a fact, a truth we can't get away from, that we're getting older and that our lifespan is finite. But also, we're living longer. There's better medical health care. There is so much we can still achieve. You know, if you're 50 now, you could have another 50 years, maybe to 100. Maybe 40 of those are actually serviceable for you to achieve something. That's out of your life again. So if you're hitting, 45, 50 and thinking, well, I might as well just stop now, you're really cheating yourself out of some amazing opportunities to still be out there and still create things, live a really full life, impact other people in positive ways. So I think I'm always saying to people, like, view it as a midlife opportunity, a midlife transformation. And I think the question is, when we've got to this point in midlife, we had this thing, the midlife crisis, and it's quite interesting that originally came from a psychoanalyst in the 60s who delivered a paper, I think, in London, and he was the first person to say midlife crisis. He talked about increasing feelings of depression and looking ahead to his own mortality. what was interesting was a few years later, he admitted he'd actually been depressed at the time, and he felt a lot more positive about life now. But we had this idea of the midlife crisis and this thing to be feared, and it was downhill from there. It's not at all. Let's look at it as midlife reinvention. I'm always saying, you now have wisdom, you have experience, you have that big portion of your life lived. Who do you want to be next? What's the identity that you want to be? What are the outcomes you want? And start living towards that.
Midlife isn't a crisis. It's a call to step into who you really are.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I love the midlife reinvention because I do think as a child, you're thinking, oh, one day I want to be a pro athlete. The next day I want to be an astronaut. The next day I want to be a podcaster. The next day I want to be, this thing or that thing, an astronaut, a firefighter. And you have this childlike mentality that you can be and do anything because you think there's so much time in front. And there's that famous quote from the Buddha, the problem is we think we have time. So then that creates the rush, feeling like we don't have time when we hear that. And we're just like, oh my gosh, I have to do this, 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 and this. And then the other thing that I want to explore with you guys is you're really excited when you're young. The plan doesn't go according to your plan. It goes according to, whether that's God's plan, whether that's unfortunate circumstance. And then all of a sudden you end up in this place. And then life grabs you. Like you said, are you living life or is life living you? When I say that, I mean, you went to school for this thing. You thought it was going to lead to this career. You got into that entry-level job fresh out of college just to pay the bills and kind of get your foot off the ground. You thought there was going to be faster growth trajectory, but inevitably now you're stuck in the rat race. You've got a car payment. You need health insurance. You're sitting in a cubicle 8 hours a day. Your body's getting tight. You're on this screen nonstop underneath artificial light. Exercise is limited now because you're so tired. You don't really have a tribe unless you're a part of a church or a gym. And now life's got you. Now you're in these golden handcuffs, which is you have all these bills to pay. Rent is more expensive than ever. You're completely exhausted at the end of your shift and you don't really want to make dinner. So you're trying to do something convenient. If you don't food prep on the weekends and think proactively or have a food prep company, now you're getting the things that have all these artificial ingredients. You're putting on weight. Now you're losing confidence looking in the mirror. Sexually, you feel like you're just not interested because you're too tired. And dating is just such a chore. It's very difficult, especially since the options are unlimited now with swiping left and right and playing the game. Now I'm depressed. Now I don't know what to do. I can't afford to pay somebody for help. So now I get into addiction, or I'm the victim mentality, or I'm a burden on my friends. And my friends are like, oh, I don't want to be around that guy or girl because they're not fun. And you feel stuck.
Yeah.
And then midlife comes and, for some people, they have kids. For some people, their parents then start to get sick.
Yeah.
And now they're seeing medical bills. Now they're seeing payment for school. And now they're seeing, oh my gosh, this is even more expensive. I need a second job, or we need to cut corners here, or we need to do this. And now you're fighting with your partner. The stress just grows and grows and grows. And your plate that seemingly used to have a lot of space on it is just full. And you don't see light at the end of the tunnel. So inevitably it feels like a crisis. You're not full of joy and pursuit and excitedness and happiness. Now you just feel like you're in this really sad, dark box. How do we deconstruct that narrative and empower people that they have choice, that it doesn't have to look like that? And we can reprogram the operating system and the habits to have abundance and love and greenery and beautiful flowers everywhere, which is a significantly different vision than the one that I just painted for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think if it's that grim, I mean, you painted a really grim picture, but a very, very, very real, very real picture for, especially in today's society, right? Which is getting crazier by the day. Because actually you add on a dollop of fear of what's going on in the world as well. So you've got all of that going on, and then you've got all the news, so the world catastrophes as well. So I think the most important thing is to definitely not do everything at once. I think starting really, really simply, actually being able to look at that with a client and say, where is your energy being expended? Like, what does life look like? Where is the highs of energy? What's draining your energy? What's giving you energy? Is anything giving you energy? Like, looking at that, like mapping it out is like the first place, so you can get a bird's eye view of what's really going on. But I think tackling pieces, the most important pieces, one at a time, not overwhelming someone. But to your point, really letting them know that they have a choice, that they've been almost captivated by this, I suppose it's the red pill or the blue pill. It's like I've bought into this way of life, and now I'm questioning everything or feeling everything. So it's about telling them that there is a different way and opening their eyes that there is a different way of living. And actually they have the capacity, the responsibility and the power to start simplifying their life. Because the thing is, I think that's simplifying. It's not about adding any more. It's about where can we simplify? What can we take out? What can we subtract here? And there will be stuff that you can subtract. It's not necessarily about adding in at that point a workout program or a nutrition program or something else, or dating. Let's go on a dating app. It's about, okay, this is a mess. It feels like a mess for you. It feels very real. What can we subtract here to bring it down a little bit?
I love that so much. During some of the most difficult moments in my life, practicing the art of minimalism
Yes.
has helped create clarity for sure. I think that's a great reminder and something that doesn't always land on my headspace. It's like, what more can I do? Because more is better. Better is not better. And I think softening the tone on that, allowing you to elongate your exhales, listening to people that are significantly smarter. When I say listening, not hearing, really listening, like what you just said around, you know what, there's a lot going on right now. Let's just take an inventory and grab a pulse as to the energy that you're feeling in these various arenas of your life or the various hats that you wear. The things that aren't giving you energy, that are maybe not towards the top of the priority list, let's see if we can let go of those altogether and refrain from this attachment style that we all possess and get back to us. Rather than reaching all the time, let's give ourselves a hug first. And then from there, we can build a relationship with ourselves before we try to date life or date our job or date fitness. It's like, can we date ourselves? Do we like our own company? It's a great question, right?
I would say most people it's a no.
Yes.
So for me, when I had that experience 2.5 years ago, I was exactly there. It was like, what can I surrender? I think surrender was a really, really big concept for me, because I felt like surrender actually meant failure. And letting go of things that I'd really held on tight, like identities, things that made me me. And actually asking myself, not necessarily consciously, but there was something very deep down inside of me, of like a realization very, very quickly of the things I needed to surrender, the things that were making me feel this way and draining my energy. And to your point, those moments in life where you've just taken a breath. I mean, the biggest, most important moment I would say of my life was when I took 9 days in silence without any devices. I mean, I had my journal, a pen, my Bible, nothing else. I didn't speak to anyone else. I mean, I literally sat there because I knew that that's what I had to do. Some people don't have
It's almost like the cave that you're fearful to enter
yeah,
is the way.
Yeah.
And
totally.
it sounds like that was very servicing for you. I know you guys are on a little bit of a tight time frame, so I want to throw some heavy hitters at you guys real quick. Claire, this one's specifically for you. What do you wish more women and men understood about menopause? Because our world views women sometimes, especially in fitness, as small men, and that's not the case at all. Like being able to use things like the Lively app, the Aura Ring, the Whoop, to better understand where women are in their hormone cycles, to then better understand, where they're at emotionally, how they should eat, how they should move, how they should interact with the world. What do you wish more people knew about menopause?
I love that question. That actually, it's not something to be feared. And I know some women might listen to that and go, yeah, but my menopause is terrible. But it's also, where's the opportunity here? It's this an amazing stage of our life where we are transitioning. And it's from being what we were into what we're becoming, if that makes sense. I get quite frustrated when I see menopause just being presented as this terrible thing to be feared and it's all awful. But actually, I see it as a woman coming out of her chrysalis. I see her as a point where she's able to spread her wings, set boundaries down, prioritize herself, say yes, say no, and really step into her power. I really see that. And what I'd like men to understand is that it's not personal. The rage, the moods, the ups and downs. This is if I would like to say to men, obviously there's two people in that, and the woman needs to be willing to communicate, but communication is everything. Be curious about what's going on for your woman. Try to stay open-minded and not take it too personally, because it's a stage that she's going through that she doesn't even necessarily like going through. The lack of libido, the mood swing, all of the stuff, she doesn't like it either, and she feels very vulnerable in that space. So as much as you can, don't take it personally and try and be curious and communicate.
Yeah, that's a good one. It's interesting because the picture that's painted is like puberty is an upgrade and menopause is a downgrade, or andropause, that decrease in testosterone, could be a downgrade. And the time that you spend prior to puberty is maybe 12 to 14 years, maybe earlier for some, maybe a little later for others. But then you spend age, let's just say 15 to 40 plus in this state where it's post puberty and pre menopause or andropause. And so it's just a dosage of time that's like really high. You get used to this phase and this type of living. And yeah, there's some subtle changes in there, but they're not as drastic as like puberty was, or as it can be later in life. And so I think that shift and change is very difficult for the mindset to comprehend. They're like, I've gotten so used to this way of living. Now I have to readjust all over again. And there's a shift in identity and how I operate, and my connection with sex, and how I think, and my mood, and potentially my career. I have to transform into somebody else. And it's unfamiliar territory, which almost feels like the adult version of the boogeyman.
Exactly.
This has been a really fun conversation, guys. How do you break down the shame around talking openly around menopause and andropause?
That's a great question. I think you just need to feel. It comes back to feeling secure in yourself, right? It's like, I question, like, why do you feel shame about it? It's a natural process that we're all going to go through. Women are going to go through menopause, men are going to go through andropause. It's as natural as having shame around it is a learned behavior. And actually, my experience has been talking to women, like going into organizations, talking to them about menopause. They're really open. I have women come and talk to me, and they're like, I would never talk to my husband about this, but I want to, talk to you about this thing. I go and talk to men. And once you open up yourself, it almost gives permission for the other person to open up. So I'd say, just go and open a conversation with someone, because actually you don't have to share like really intimate details if you don't want, but maybe just talk about how you're feeling, what you're struggling with a bit as a result of this. Oh, are you feeling the same? And then the other person will be like, oh, you know what? Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because I've been feeling so alone with this. I thought it was just me, and it's not. So I think that shame is keeping everyone trapped, thinking this is a unique experience that only they are going through, when actually it's very common to many of us. And the more we can talk about it, the better it is.
Totally. Midlife isn't the beginning of the end. It's the end of the beginning.
Boom.
Yeah.
And my final dollop of curiosity for you guys today is, if you got to give one piece of advice to somebody entering their 40s or their 50s that's feeling stuck, what would you say? Claire, we'll start with you.
I would say get yourself in community, actually. I really feel like isolating yourself is obviously the worst thing we can do when we're feeling stuck. So the very, very first thing I would do is get yourself into, even if it's an online group, get yourself into a place where like-minded people are there, so you don't feel so alone. That would be number one.
James, what you got?
I'm totally going to agree with what Claire said. I'd say once you've done that, is like learn to be playful and curious again. So, it's not a one size fits all, but don't be afraid to put yourself out there and experiment with things, and that one thing you find that moves the needle on feeling from stuck to not stuck to I'm enjoying life. Just get out there and be playful and curious and make those connections.
So beautifully said. Ladies and gentlemen, the powerhouse couple behind the Midlife Mentors. Guys, where can people find you?
So they can go onto our website, midlifementors.com. On Instagram, we are at Midlife Mentors, and on TikTok, we are at the Midlife Mentors.
Very cool. Thank you so much for sharing this space with me and giving us additional information on midlife, on health, on wellness, on psychology, on physiology. I think there's a lot of value packed into this one that we can share with our community.
Thank you so much for having us.
Loved it.
Guys, if you enjoyed my conversation with the Midlife Mentors, Claire and James Davis, please rate, review, subscribe, and share with your friends. And as always, stay on the hunt for who you've not yet become. Until next time.